Our final segment here on Aero-TV from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm joined by ANN's Editor-in-Chief, Jim Campbell. One of the few times that I'm on the left and you're on the right, unless this might happen to be a helicopter.
Don't let it go to your head. Don't let it go. How the heck did I wind up in the right seat? I don't know.
Back to your instructor days.
Yes, I'm telling you.
It's been an interesting show.
You know, it has. And for all of the malaise that other aspects of the industry have experienced, the avionics industry still leads the way, still provides extraordinary innovation, and if truth be told, if there is any residual or even occasional increase in the utility, usefulness, and the actual use of aircraft, it's the avionics industry that's responsible for it. I'm fond of telling a story of the guy with a Cherokee 140. He bought originally, not in the greatest shape, for $8,000, and did this and did that, and tweaked this and painted. And eventually he put an Aspen glass panel in there. And he's got PS Engineering's 8000 BT in there, and he's all set and he goes places. Granted, he's barely doing 100 knots, but he's got a bunch of stores in 3 states. He goes around, he does his business, he's having a great old time. He takes clients on a 50, 60-mile flight for lunch. They think the world of him. The airplane has become a tool. But that little Cherokee 140 really had no utility to him until he redeveloped the panel. With synthetic vision, with better IFR capability, with good radios, with the ability to fly decent IFR and know what's going on and what he's facing and the weather on the way and the traffic, especially runs into Fort Lauderdale, which is kind of really a crapshoot when it comes to traffic. It's the avionics industry that's led the way, and if we could get 1/10 of the innovation, the disruptive technology, the effort in power plants, in manufacturing, or in rewriting the regs, this would be a totally different industry.
Well, you know, there's a lot of enthusiasm for the Part 23 rewrite that's coming up. We've talked with that with a lot of folks here this week, and it seems like nobody's seeing it really as a panacea, but they all say that it's going to be helpful in bringing new products to market in a way that they won't be outdated by the time they actually go in a panel. And we've all seen with the advances in technology of the things that we carry around every day that that's a real consideration. By the time they got through the FAA regulatory process of 2, 3, 5 years, the next best thing was already in development or available for your car, but not necessarily your airplane.
The FAA, and those of us who have to deal or interface with the FAA, really need to sit down and talk. I'm not going to be overtly critical of the FAA. The FAA is the animal that it is. It does what it has to do. It is a bureaucratic organization that is dedicated to building better bureaucracies. But those better bureaucracies really don't benefit aviation. There are so many success stories here that could have been much more successful a year, even 2 years ahead of time, if not for the extraordinary amount of paperwork, if not for the fact that, well, you got to have this first done, and you've got about 500 pounds of paperwork, you got to have this in triplicate, and I'm sending you back your 200-page report because you misspelled page 3. Baloney. We saw some cracks in the dam here. The AOA certification procedure, as it is, was aided by a voluntary standard recognized by the FAA as established under ASTM. We've already seen what ASTM does to LSA. More new designs were debuted under LSA than for decades and decades and decades in GA. There is a way for the industry to cooperate, take its own destiny, its own hand, build something that the FAA can recognize but not necessarily control or regulate, and build an industry that's far more innovative, far more revolutionary, far more useful, and God help us, far more cost effective. It's time for us to look at an aviation that obeys the rules of the road or the rules of the air as established by the FAA, but at the same time is allowed to be innovative and even safer as a function of the fact that we're able to be more innovative, more creative, and to be thinking way ahead of the curve. There's a couple of products that were supposed to be here last year and almost made it. Some of those products are still not here, and the paperwork is taller than I stand, which may not be saying much, but it's wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. And with all the extraordinary stuff, I mean, we look out here, it's absolutely amazing. There's great stuff, there's tremendous excitement, and there was 6.9% new business.
Right.
So we're doing a lot of things right, but could you Could you imagine what would happen if the FAA kind of got off our case and the industry was allowed to build and innovate unrestrained?
But if I could play devil's advocate for
you do
half
devil's
of it,
advocate so well. Go for
I
it.
do actually do that well. And maybe not so much devil's advocate, but maybe a dose of realism in that in the litigious society in which we live, that the first time somebody is in an airplane with something that didn't go through that years-long certification process, and there's an accident, God forbid, I think that's what so many people run scared of, is that they'll be sued out of existence for something that they frankly shouldn't have been.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're going to sue you anyway. Having a certification standard, being right, being totally blameless, hasn't stopped anybody from being sued. And we're not saying that there don't need to be standards or quote-unquote regulations, but there is an industry consensus standard of the kinds that have been brought forth by ASTM in many aviation areas. They've got fuel standards, they're working UAV, they did LSA, they're working with certain types of aircraft instrumentation, they're working a lot in the military and aerospace regime. They have proven to have the bona fides. And if the FAA recognizes those standards, I can't say that it has the full force that the FAA would otherwise have had, but between you and the fence post, if we're allowed to keep innovating and show bigger and better, and one of the things that gets criticized, this is something actually people get sued for. Well, your XYZ 2000 Mockbuster Thundercrunch Mark II was not as good as it could have been. You eventually developed the Mockbuster Thundercrunch Mark III. The problem is without the FAA, we could be on the Mark IV, the Mark V, the Mark VI, and that much far down the line. And maybe some of those innovations actually avoid the accident altogether. Wow. So as a result, we might not feed a whole bunch of lawyers. Oh, what a shame.
And I think a good example of that is something that has been prominent at this show, and that's the AOA indicators.
Perfect.
It's a perfect example, and I've asked a couple of people, why did it take so long for this really very simple piece of technology to wind up in a general aviation cockpit? And I think that somebody mentioned that okay, a stall warning indicator is in essence an AOA indicator, but it's 1 or 0, it's on or off. And for that kind of thing to finally show up where you get a good representation of what's happening with your airplane, and can make those corrections, as you said, before the accident happens, why that took so long to get into a GA cockpit is a little surprising.
Between you, me, and the fence post, we only have to avoid one accident. We're all on God's side as far as I'm concerned at that point. And yet, the other thing here to remember is that we have, in this case, within this industry, an association that actually gets the job done. AEA, and you know us, I mean, folks out there can tell you, both you and I, that if we got something to say that's not necessarily the most positive thing in the world, nothing's going to keep us from saying it so long as we research it, know it's true, and know that it has to be said. What we see from AEA, we have the most progressive, the hardest working, most representative association with any spectrum I've seen. They are prepared to take this industry even further forward the minute somebody can take the blinders off. And the blinders are on. I got accused a little bit of the statement of saying, well, there are a lot of people at the FAA who really are trying, and they are. It's the middle management, upper management, and the bureaucracies that they're subject to that create the problem. But, boy, I can't possibly believe that we would be anything but far better off if we had a lot less interference, far smarter regulatory environment, and the ability for the industry to work together for better, safer, more innovative, and dare I say it, disruptive technologies.
The other thing that I find really compelling about this particular show is that there are things here for all segments of the industry.
Yep.
Everything from the ultralight or LSA pilot all the way up to the guys flying the Falcon 7X jets. And I think that one of the things that people may not understand is that some of that technology is the same these days. You talked about the glass panels, and the Aspen glass panel for the GA product has a lot of similarities with the full-blown Garmins and Avidynes of the world. It brings the same information into the cockpit. at a price point that is affordable for somebody who's a weekend pilot.
I got news for you. Some of the Boeings I'm crewing on these days are not nearly as well as equipped as the average Aspen glass panel or Avidyne or some of the others. We have better gear. We have safer gear. We have more intuitive gear. If we train to the gear and we're smart about how we install and what we choose and how we select it. Now, keep in mind, the big story here is the Next Gen GA Fund is giving us tools by which we can improve our airplanes for less money, with federal guarantees for the bank, so the bank doesn't look at the airplane like, oh my gosh, it's a tool of the devil. You're not going to have to mortgage the airplane, or lien it or anything like that. And you're working with a system that is working cooperatively with the AEA, working with the rest of the agency, that everybody benefits. So there's no excuse not to get with the times. There's no excuse not to take advantage of the technology, because it's never going to get cheaper than it is right now, unless we get rid of the FAA's influence. But in the meantime, 2020 is coming fast, and if you want to get with the times, now's the time to start working on upgrading your panel. And right out here, they got it. They got all the goodies you could possibly want.
69 months, somebody told me here a little bit ago.
Oh, great.
Yeah, thanks very much. Jim, we are out of time. We are done.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, we're out of time. But we want to thank everybody for watching our coverage of the AEA convention. We've had a great time being here. There's a lot of good innovation, and you'll be seeing a lot more of it down through the next few weeks on AeroTV and on Aero-News.net. So, until the next time, I'm Tom Patton for Jim Campbell. You're watching live coverage of AEA's 57th Annual Convention and Trade Show at the Gaylord Hotel and Convention Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks for watching.
Aero-TV's coverage of the 57th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Nashville, Tennessee, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors. Aspen Avionics offers the most flexible and affordable certified synthetic vision system. Try it now, absolutely free, during your first 10 hours of flight when you purchase an Aspen Avionics EFD 1000 Pro primary flight display. Customizable display layouts enhance the data you need when you need it. Once you try Aspen's Evolution Synthetic Vision, we think you'll never look at your PFD the same way again. AML's patent-pending wireless induction charging system eliminates confusion over those charging cables, cuts down cockpit cable clutter, and allows you and your passengers to fly cordless and eliminate the cable nightmare. www.aviationmodificationleaders.com